welcome to Augmented Naturally Generation 5. Generation Unova. You know what I mean. Pokemon Go, we're talking about Generation 5. This week we're going to discuss the impact of Generation 5 on Pokemon Go and how to prepare for it. Has there been an adventurous upgrade? We're going over Green Eye Coffee Part 2 of 3, and virtual races, and are community days being invaded? Stay tuned to the podcast to hear all the segments, or tune into both episodes for the video. Now we're going to go over the preparation for Gen 5. Obviously, the most important thing you need to think about is inventory space. This inventory space is going to be vital when it comes to new generations. You're going to want to go through everything that you don't need anymore. Go through with a fine-tooth comb, figure out if it has good PvP IVs, or if you want to keep it around for your next stage evolutions, or if you're doing a living dex of some sort. If you're working on a medal of that type, consider evolving anything that you have extra candies or the lower levels of. That way you can get that extra evolution. You get the extra evolution and that extra tick on the medal. We'll go into that a little later when we're talking about the dragon medal. But once you've gone through all your inventory space, consider the items that you don't need anymore, like the evolution items from Gen 2. You can scrap 90% of them. You only need like 2 or 3 of them if you still need those evolutions. Otherwise, the main berries you want to keep around are the pineapple berries. So the pineapple berries you're going to get in the highest ratio from presents. The gifts you get from friends or acquaintances, anything, you want to open them up, and those will actually have the best ratio for getting the Great and Ultra Balls as well. The ratio exactly, I'm not sure, but either way, they're the easiest to get. Make sure you open your 20 gifts a day. Guaranteed. You'll be well stocked on pineapples, ultras, great balls. Just trash the Pokeballs for the time being and go from there. That's one of the biggest things you can do to prepare for the next generation. The thing you also want to keep in mind is any medals that you may need to work up into, because those are a flat 1, 2, and 3% that are going to be in addition to every time that you throw a Pokeball at that type, you'll get the chance that medal is actually going to help you capture it instead of it jumping out right away. Now, the Dragon Medal is by far the most difficult medal to work up into. Now, obviously, there's only about 3 species of dragon types, and right now half of them are raid bosses. You got Dratini, you got Bagon, you have Gible, and then you have the legendaries Latios, Latias, and Rayquaza. The other misnomers the other random ones that you may not think about are Kingdra and Altaria. They are dragon types, but they require a bit of an investment if you want to use them towards building up your dragon medal. Now, this dragon medal is going to be a little tricky. So what you can actually do is take things like Dratini or Gible or even Bagon. When you find them in the high tourist areas, national parks usually, something with a lot of history, and in some cases boardwalks or other ocean biomes, those will actually have them at a higher ratio. Those touristy areas will automatically have things spawning at higher rates because of the cell phone activity that you get during the summer. The trick is to go there during the off season and you have the entire place to yourself, and it is a thing of beauty. You can ride the tram for hours if you want. You can just bike up and down the boardwalk if you need, or get there bright and early and be the first one maybe a few regular walkers, but you get everything to yourself. Obviously, back then, when it was just Dratini, we didn't have pineapples, we didn't have anything else like that. So everything that we caught, we actually would evolve. It only takes 25 to evolve from Dratini to Dragonair, Bagon to Shelgon, and Gibble to Gabite. And prior to any community days for dragon types coming out, that catch medal was very difficult because you would find one maybe once a week or once a catch session if you were to go to the boardwalk or something. But either way, it was still a lot easier to spend the 25 candies because you may end up hatching one down the line. So you hatch one, evolve it, and then if you're not going to keep it, just transfer it away to the professor, you know. He trades you some good candy for it. Those old people always have those candy dishes around. Yeah. The other thing you could potentially do is, if Swablu are really that prevalent in your area, make sure you're always pineapping them. That way, at 400 candies, you get an extra dragon type. That's if you're really that sparse on it. But still, that's an option you can take. Same thing with Horsey. If you're in an ocean biome and there's not that many Dratinis out, but you have a ton of Horsey nest, quite simply go there, pineapple, and upon getting enough dragon scale as well, you can evolve Seadra to Kingdra, and that gets you your extra dragon type. You can do the same thing, same strategy for all the other types as well. If you're having trouble finding the fairy types, keep in mind Jigglypuff. That's a common one that is always around and will easily get you that medal. Clefairy if you're in a mountain biome or playing around a full moon. You can do the same strategy once you can find them, because that second stage evolution, if it has that type, it will count as a catch for that medal. So that's the trick to getting around the rigmarole of doing all those catches. Oh right, I almost forgot. Alolan Executor. If it's a sunny day and they happen to be spawning again, catch them. They are considered a dragon type, so go crazy with that one. While we're on the topic of pineapping everything, the starters are always a good one to pineapple. Should you find a Cyndaquil, Chikorita, or any of the other generation starters, pineapple the living heck out of them. They are vital towards having trade material for everything else. You can go down the line, and when the community day refresh is coming on, or if they re-release them, those candies are going to be vital. That way you can power up or evolve as many as you need. That way you have plenty of things to trade. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is, with this new generation, there's about 153, about 156 if you include the other forms that are introduced with some of the legendaries. But just like Gen 3, they're going to do a theme launch. It's the best way they can get the most out of each generation, best way you can get, and it keeps a nice flavor for each time it happens. That way you know a best hunting spot for everything, or whether you want to go to a cluster spawn for various catches. The ratio that they do their shinies though, it's usually between Generation 1 and Generation 3. There's only so many left for Generation 1, but everyone's definitely waiting for them. So this time it's probably going to be Generation 2 and Generation 4 that are going to have the majority of their shinies released. Granted, some of them have already been out, so something to keep in mind is Niantic wants to augment your real world. So they're going to release events towards real world events. They will often happen around real world holidays. So we're going into our most busy months. So we got Halloween, Thanksgiving, winter, Christmas. Now all these events going on, it's going to roll right into New Year's. Then we're going to taper off a little bit. and then it's going to hit hard and fast again with February to March from all the random little events that are going to go on in the middle. Some people talked about having Burnout back then because there was a holiday around every corner. It's just the way everything goes, that they want to buddy up with any regular holidays. That way you build that habit of showing up and playing the game during those holidays. Or it's also that them being a tech company, they have off all of those holidays. Us in the food service industry, we don't, but we try. So when it comes to holidays like that, most people will be off. So from people being off, that means they can play more. So that's when Niantic feels the best time for events to happen. So just something to keep in mind in case you work in a similar industry. Save your pay time off or your sick time towards that area or time frame. That way you can get in the gameplay that you want and you don't fall behind on any events. Because there is always that FOMO that goes on with Pogo. It happens. Now, some speculation that we have been thinking of, considering that we're going into the 5th generation of Pokemon Go, that the regionals, they very well may shake up and switch up. So we're thinking that Tauros could possibly be replaced by Bouffalant. Farfetch'd could be replaced by Alduino. It feels better some ways, but that might just be me. Kangaskhan could be replaced by Maractus. Mr. Mime could be replaced by Sigilyph. And there could be other regionals that get added. They've been adding a new regional every generation, it seemed. Aside from Gen 3, no, they still have them, yeah. But from there, it could be done in multiple different ways. I honestly think that they could actually roll out with the release of Gen 5. They can make regionals still show up in their respective region, but they will have the chance, like Unknown, that they could possibly show up in another spot. So it's always a possibility that they could show up in one or other spots, but their main cluster will be in the US or in Europe or something along those lines. That way they still maintain their exclusivity, but also people that are shiny hunters still have a slight chance that they could still find them and then be shiny. And something I thought of recently prior to the writing of this episode was, what if they release them into Nest? And those nests could then be if the Gen 1 regionals got released into Nest, that could still allow for Mime Jr. to be introduced, as it would reduce the minimal exclusivity of it, as well as cicadas and other things going on. Fun. But if they release them into the Nest pool, then that could create more attention and more interactions with the nests that currently don't really exist. People see a nest, they think, okay, that one's a nest, and that's about it. Unless it's something really prevalent or really rare, or they're collecting in some way or looking for that certain type, they're not really bothering with a nest, and nests aren't really that prevalent towards some of the casual players, because there's no identifying markers. You really just have to realize that, oh, there's 2 or more of them there. That might be a nest. I should come back more often and catch them. I think that it would allow for more exploration and more community building, and some of the tools that the Sylph Road already provide would be more used. But that's just some of my crazy Augmented One storms there. Just random thoughts on how things could go. Now, it seems like Niantic loves releasing everything during the fall, and for good reason. The fall is borderline perfect weather for most communities, and especially the US, where Niantic is based out of. So they have somewhat of an impact on things. So from that aspect, you get a well-rounded spread of items or Pokemon during that time frame. Now, the most exciting part about a new generation being introduced to Pokemon Go during that time frame, during the fall, is you get plenty of spooky, creepy, haunty, gothy, punky, aesthetic Pokemon that you get to catch and take pictures in your Halloween costume with. Now, the spooky ones to keep an eye out for, especially for Gen 5, are Litwick, Nullbacked, Blitzel. These were ones that were already leaked or alluded to by the various data miners, and these Gen 5 Pokemon fit the spooky aesthetic quite perfectly. Join us in a little bit for the caffeine calibrations. The continuation of the Green Eye Coffee will give you a refresher since this is our first video. As well as our segment on virtual races and the Augmented One storm. Our community days being invaded? Stay tuned.